This is the life and times of Charlie Munson, born May 25th, 1933 in the town of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Parents, mother Cecile Beaulieu, B-E-A-U-L-I-E, which is French meaning beautiful place. Her parents came from near Montreal in Canada, on a little town named Tres Balles, which means three balls. She was French, her daddy was French Canadian, and they settled in Hibbing, Minnesota, which is a coal town way up in northern Minnesota. She was among the first graduating class from the town of Hibbing in a very beautiful high school, which was built to soothe the conscience of John D. Rockefeller and the iron magnate. And this was a time in the United States when fortunes were being made with industry, coal, ore, gold, and these gentlemen felt guilty about taking all these riches back east, so they built a huge high school there, which is there to this day, and which is still one of the most beautiful high schools in the United States. Her dad was a miner. There was a huge iron mine there called the I'll think of that in a minute. He lost his leg during his early days when he was working in the mine, and subsequently, when mother and my Aunt Mary, moved to Sioux Falls, they would bring him down to Sioux Falls, which was about 400 miles, for the winter, and then take him back for the summer again. Mother graduated from high school, then went to St. Mary's Hospital at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. She was a member of the original graduating class from the high school, and graduated in 1928 from the nurses training. After marrying father, Grant Munson, they settled in Sioux Falls. He was from a little tiny town in Kennedy, Minnesota, which was just about 30 miles from the Canadian border, straight north of Fargo, straight north of here. They settled for a few years in Sioux Falls, and then in about 1937 or 38 they separated for a while. Mother went to DeSmet, South Dakota. She was an RN at that time and had been working for a doctor in Sioux Falls, but she took me and my sister, Cecile, who was 4 years younger than I, and we spent the first year in DeSmet. I went to first grade there. I think father went up to Minneapolis and worked up there. He also had been, they said, years ago on the train as a bum, and went to California and worked there for a while back in the 20s. When I got ready to go to first grade, I went in DeSmet. Then we came back the next year to Sioux Falls. Father came from Minneapolis, mother came from DeSmet. They joined again on the east side of Sioux Falls. I checked our places of living in Sioux Falls during that period from 1934 to 1949, and we lived probably in 5 or 6 different houses on the east side of Sioux Falls. Mother went to work again at the hospital. Father went to work selling or repairing cars. In 1941, the war broke out. That was the Second World War. Because of father's ability to drive tractors and heavy equipment, he was in the Seabees. This stood for Construction Battalion, and eventually he went to the South Pacific. During that time, when mother was alone here with Cecile, me, my sister, and I, I went to first grade in Vermilion. She was a county nurse in Vermilion. And during the war, which lasted until 1945, I went to 3 or 4 different schools in Vermilion. 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade. Right after the war, we went out to Los Angeles to pick up my father, who was coming back from the Pacific. And I went to a couple of schools out there. We were only there about a month or two, but I went to 2 different grade schools there. When we got back to Sioux Falls in 45, I started at Lincoln Grade School over on the west side of Sioux Falls. I went to half of 5th grade there. No, half of 7th grade. Half of 7th grade there. And then we moved to the east side of Sioux Falls, where I stayed until I got married. I had several jobs you got all that on there?
What about your jobs? As you were growing up, you talked about a number of jobs.
Yeah, I always was looking for something to do to make some money. And in Vermilion, I had a paper out 3 days a week when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade. And I also set pins at the local bowling alley there. And I did some light work for farmers around Vermilion when they needed some weeds pulled or something like that. When we got back to Sioux Falls, I had paper routes. I delivered the Argus, and I delivered the Sioux City Journal, I delivered the Des Moines Register. And then I got a job at a creamery in Sioux Falls, Dairyland Creamery. I stayed with them for about 10 years. I would get up in the morning, put the pipes together, and pasteurize some milk. And then after school at Washington High, I would go to the creamery again, wash milk bottles, work in the ice cream departments, and do various Sunday jobs. During that time, I joined the National Guard because I got a few bucks there. 1 year after I joined the Guards, the Korean War broke out, and they took our whole unit from Sioux Falls. It's called the 196th Regimental Combat Team. And while I could have gotten out of the Guards because of my age, I elected to go with him, and I did. We went to Colorado, to Camp Carson, and then I went to Kansas City. And then they needed an airplane mechanic, so I went down to Texas, San Marcos, Texas, for about 2 months or whatever. And then they took the whole unit to Alaska. So I got back with the unit, and I spent a year up in Alaska taking care of that airplane. And then when I got back, after a couple years...
During your time in Alaska, did you continue your education, or did you just stop after you left Sioux Falls?
Well, because I hadn't gotten my high school diploma, I took things through the mail. They had a service where you sent your lessons in and you got credits, college credits. So when I got out of the Army, I already had about 8 or 10 credits, I guess. And then I thought, then I left Sioux Falls and went to Vermilion because the medical school was down there, and I got into med school. And took 2 years of medical school in Vermilion, and because of the size of our state, we didn't have 4 years, which is what you're supposed to have. So I had to transfer somewhere in the United States to get the last.
I think we got all that on the other piece we did.
Okay.
Couple other questions. Back to your elementary school years. Do you have any specific memories of any of your elementary years that really stick out?
Well, I had a couple teachers I really liked. My homeroom teacher, I stayed in contact with her till I was married, actually. I stayed in contact with her for 5 or 6 years after I...
And what was her name, and what grade did she teach?
Her name was Geraldine Mulfey. She taught me how to type, and she was my homeroom teacher. And got the baseball stuff is already on there.
Yeah. How about your first mode of transportation? You've talked about a scooter and then eventually a car. You got a bike, obviously, but then what?
Yeah, I had a bike, and then bought a war surplus motor scooter. Cushman was the name of the motor scooters in those days, and if you had the money, you got a Cushman. But I got together enough cash where I got a used Army surplus motor scooter, and I drove that for a couple years, and then I got a used Oldsmobile. My father worked in a mechanic shop when he was during the Depression, and there were some old cars in there, and I got one of them, a 1936 Oldsmobile, and kept that for a couple of years till I got out of the Army. Saved my money when I was in the Army. Didn't have a car for 3 or 4 years there, but then I got the Oldsmobile.
When you did go to Alaska, a cousin of yours went that you've talked a lot about because you spent a lot of time with that family. Why did you spend so much time with that family?
Well, his mother was my mother's sister.
So your aunt,
Yeah,
and her name was?
Their name was Teeman.
Was it Mary?
Mary, yeah.
Mary Teeman.
And we were more like brothers than we were cousins. And when we came back, we kind of ran around together for a while. But then I went off to school, and he went off to school, and he passed away here a few years ago from a cancer. So I think that's, yeah, about it. She wasn't too excited about it. I was playing Legion baseball then too. That was kind of a feather in my hat. I made that baseball team even though I wasn't physically very big. And I played my last baseball game and left to go to Colorado in August of that year. John and I talked my cousin John into joining too earlier on, and he went with me, and we went to Colorado, Fort Carson. They needed somebody to go to mechanic school, so I went to Kansas. I went to Camp Funston in Kansas. I came back to the unit again, and they had all gotten ready to go to Alaska. The project there was to prove that we could pick up a regimental combat team and move them all as far as we wanted to. So while they were getting ready to go, they needed an airplane mechanic, so I went down to Texas, and that was in May of 51, I think. And I took a school down there, and then I was an airplane mechanic. Jumped on the train, went to Seattle, Washington, got on the boat, went up to Alaska, and stayed there for about a year. Slept in tents for about 4 or 5 months, and then we got in kind of a what do you call a round thing?
Like a Quonset hut?
Yeah, Quonset hut. Yeah, in about March of next spring, and stayed there until May of the next year. Came back to Sioux Falls again. Now I had the GI Bill, and the state gave us a bonus of about $1,000, and I thought I would try and get into medical school. Got back with the Creamery again. They were waiting for me. I guess they closed it down for a while.
So you left high school before you graduated.
Yes, I did.
To go with the Guard.
Yes, I did. Yeah, while I was in the Guards, I took some what they call USAFE courses. They were from Madison, Wisconsin. It was an educational arm of the Army. So I took some classes in history and English literature and French and a few other things while I was up in Alaska. Okay, then back to Sioux Falls again. I went to Augie for 1 year. Then I went down to the University of South Dakota for 3 years of pre-med.
While you were at Augie, you talked about playing baseball. That was kind of a big part of your life.
Yeah.
When did you start playing baseball, and did you end up playing for Augie?
I started playing baseball when I told you about Lincoln grade school. I just wanted to. I never played a day of baseball in my life, but I loved it, and so I went to the team there. And then when I moved over to the east side, I got on the Legion team for 2 years. And then when I played 1 year at Augie too. And then when I went to Vermilion, I played just briefly there because I had too much lab work and everything else. But I did play a little stint at the University of South Dakota. Whew. Then it was pre-med, got accepted at med school, and met a lady that I liked very much, and we got married a year later.
What year did you meet Mom?
I met Mom about 1955, and or maybe 50.
So you met Mom in what year?
55, I think. Met the lady I was going to marry in 1955.
And was she going to school in Vermillion, or how did you come across her?
At that time, she was working at a restaurant, the Chimes Cafe in Vermillion, and then at the local telephone office. We were married in I said 1956, June 19th, 1956, and I started medical school shortly thereafter. We had to transfer to Kansas City, and we did that in 1957, and spent 2 years in Kansas City. Because South Dakota only had a 2-year medical school, and the last 2 years were spent there, and we graduated in 1960, I think. We spent 1 year after graduating from medical school, or 2 years in Wichita at St. Francis Hospital. I took 1 year of orthopedics. At that time, we decided that we would go out in the world and start practicing. And we picked Parkston, South Dakota.
Now, what about your residency while you were in Wichita? Didn't you come somewhere in South Dakota to do a residency?
No, I took.
Or an internship?
No, not really. I took the internship at Wichita 1 year, rotating internship. And then in 1961 we came to South Dakota.
But you were in Platt under a Dr. Calda doing something.
That was part of my 2 years here.
Okay.
South Dakota had a program where you went out with a doctor for 6 weeks, and I was in Platt, South Dakota, which is about 40 miles from Parkston, and spent 6 weeks there. When I got to Kansas, they were also starting to inaugurate that type of program, so I went to a town called Lincoln, Kansas for 6 weeks when I was in Kansas City. We arrived in Parkston on the 5th of July 1961 at 9:15 in the morning. I had a cup of coffee at the Corner Cafe. Spent about 50 years in Parkston. Even after I had retired here, I think I retired in '94 from active practice here. I had joined a Dr. McCann, who had been here prior to my coming, and he left probably about 15 years before I retired. So I was more or less by myself for about 15 years at the end. I delivered about 1,700 babies while I was here.
How did you actually end up here? Wasn't there some circumstance where Dr. McCann needed someone?
Yeah. Well, yeah, they had a service in the state where they listed towns that wanted doctors, and he had his name in that listing, and I came here, and we built a house here and raised 6 children here. My wife died in 1998 from lung cancer, and my kids have all been quite healthy and have all been successful, and I got no complaints at all.
In 1957, when your son Tim was born, where were you?
I was in Platt at that time, as I explained earlier, with the Dr. Calda, and about 4 in the morning, Kay went into labor, and I drove to Vermillion that morning. That was about 100 miles. And Just made it. I think I had a quarter of a tank, I'm eighth or 16th of a tank of gas when I got there. But I missed Tim's delivery because I was about half an hour late.
And a few years later came along another baby.
We had a baby in Kansas City, Marcy. We had a baby in Wichita, Brenda. We had a baby in Parkston, Mark and Robert, and our little Erica.
What's one memory of, let's just say Tim, what's one memory growing up that you remember of Tim?
Oh, I had a cardboard box that I had drawn a wagon on, I think, or something, when we lived in the house in Kansas City. We were in an older house in a neighborhood, and he loved that little wagon, so to speak, that I had made for him. That was about, he was about 6 months old then.
And how about the next one, Marcy? Memories of her.
Oh, Marcy, standing in the back. Our entertainment on the weekends was to get in the car, go look at used cars. I had the old Plymouth, 50 Plymouth, and I wanted a different car, but I didn't have the wherewithal to buy one at that time. So we'd go around, drive around, and she'd stand in the back of on the back seat, and holler whoa or whoo or something as we drive around.
And then there's Brenda.
And there's Brenda. She'd be out cleaning up outside every house we lived in with a broom or a rake or something. She was always busy outside, like who was it? Cinderella, yeah.
And then Mark.
And Mark's gut was always hanging out. His belly button had saw more. If he'd had an eye in there, he'd have been the wisest person in the world. His gut would hang down, and of course the trip in the convertible with Mark when I passed a little gas. We were by ourselves. It was cold outside, and I let a slider go out, and Mark's yakking about something. He stopped right in the middle of his conversation, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "I wonder who farted." We were the only ones in the convertible.
And Robert.
And Robert. Let's see. God, I'm not sure which I could come up with a good one here. You weren't the one that went along on the hunting trip out by. That was Mark, I think. Brady and I took Mark duck hunting one morning. I said, "Stay right here in that cornfield. Stay right here. Don't move." And he, "Dad."
How about Erica?
Oh, yours was probably once they go in there, they never see the light of day. Yeah, that would have to be your topper. Erica was checking the deer. I can't remember anything else right now. Now, about 10 years ago, I had a stroke involving the right side of my brain, the part of the brain that categorizes information, that builds memories, that is involved somewhat with seeing, and it's a rather intricate part of the brain. I survived the stroke pretty good. I didn't have any weakness of my arms or legs, no severe trouble getting around or doing physical things. However, I acquired a condition which affects the vision somewhat. There's a portion of the brain which is involved with recognizing faces. Very intricate thing, sort of like a TV set. You don't really see with your eyes, you see with your brain back in the parietal lobe. And I had a small stroke of the parietal lobe. I got over the stroke okay, but the residual, the effects that followed were somewhat disconcerting for a while. The face of the people that I was seeing for the next 10 years, actually to this day, I still have some involvement with this. But the face would be altered. It's sort of like you erased part of the face of the person you were looking at. It had some other sequential happenings that happened that were involved with vision also, but basically, from time to time, the face would disappear, and it took some time for it to return, perhaps an hour, perhaps half a day. In numbers, these episodes have diminished over the years. I still get them occasionally. But at this time now, I have another condition that's sort of appearing, which is involved with hallucinations. Strange things happen that are not explainable. Those that deal with mental problems, physiology problems, recognize them. It's sort of like they know about measles, they know about mumps, they know about various and sundry things, but there isn't a whole lot to do when this happens. It's somewhat disconcerting, but it's not debilitating to the point where it affects your daily activities. So right now I see things, especially at night, almost always at night, I see things appearing that shouldn't be there. People, cats, dogs. I'll wake up and there I'll have for maybe 5 to 10 seconds I'll have a cat in my bedroom, and for all intents and purposes you'd swear it was there. It looks real. And I haven't really pursued it too far because it doesn't really, as I said, doesn't affect my daily activities.
You'd also mentioned at one time that you could look in a room of faces and everyone's face appeared to be the same person. The
common thing that happens with this it's called prosogosia. That's the one I told you about that came after the stroke. The common thing that happens here is part of the face disappears. Sort of like if you had somebody's skull and this part of the skin was suddenly gone from a fourth of the face. Always the same place. The upper outer quadrant of the face disappears. The eyes become a little bit spread. The teeth become more prominent. It's almost like you're looking at some of these skulls from World War II that are laid around all over. That's one thing. The other thing that happens about equally as often as the one I just told you about is if I walk into a room and see a face and there's 20 people in the room, they all assume the appearance of that one face. So everybody in the place looks like, if I look at a TV set and Groucho Marx is on the TV, everybody in the room looks like Groucho Marx for maybe 15 or 20 minutes or sometimes as much as a half a day. So those two things are known to science. There's not really anything to do with them. It's sort of like people used to have seizures years ago, epileptic seizures. Well, they had them, part of the brain went crazy for a while and then it settled down. And they have them usually for years and years and years. So that's where I'm at right now. Otherwise, still got a little high blood pressure. I've got a touch of cancer of the prostate. I've got my thyroid quit working. They operated on my gallbladder 3 times to get all the stones out of it. Had a hernia fix, and my back's killing me. I got some shocks that are shot in my lower back, just like the old 39 Ford. But other than that, I'm good for a few more miles, I guess. Okay, I think we've got me on tape there.
And generations will see this. It'll be passed down. What would you tell the grandchildren of the grandchildren of the grandchildren?
I would say your grandmother Munson was probably the stalwart. What would you call it? Pole that suspended this whole thing. She did a lot of work to keep the family together in the early days. Read a little bit about your grandmother Munson, because she was between her extra schooling till she was about 60 and slipping us little money to keep going. But the best thing that ever happened to me was being drafted and going in the Army and getting the support from the Army. That's probably the thing that got me off the pad. Read. Your grandfather says read if you want to be successful. Okay, that tired me out. I think I'm ready to